Hi guys, Asmo here, and today I wanted to showcase and talk about the build that I use to complete most of my challenges. I got the 38 out of 40 challenges, completing all of the rewards that give you this juicy MTX. But before I start talking about the build, let me just start this little invitation that has 171 quantity, and while this is all going on, I'm gonna be talking about the build. So the build is basically a Herald of Agony Occultist. Herald of Agony Occultist, the idea for this was basically I wanted to check out how Poison Herald of Agony is going to work, because poison minions have been buffed. The poisons are doing now more damage for minions, and on top of that Herald of Agony has been buffed as well, giving it more attack speed per virulence. So I decided to try that out on an occultist, which gives you a lot of good options for scaling chaos damage, as well as access to notables from the Forbidden Flesh that can give you the Necromancer's Unnatural Strength, which gives me 30% of physical damage as extra chaos for my Herald. So as you can see, I am AFK in this invitation. The minion is attacking the last remaining Guardian, which is gonna die in a moment, and the build is very tanky and does very respectable damage, even if you're not pressing any buttons, because of some of the mechanics that I'm gonna explain in a moment. But basically the build relies on Herald of Agony for damage, and pretty much that's it. We're not scaling any other sources of damage. We're getting this to roughly 10 million Shaper DPS. You can get to like maybe 15 if you really juice everything up and recraft the weapon and get better jewels. But I got to like 10 million Shaper DPS, and the character features a lot of layers of tankiness, right? We have like 50k armor when the Flasks are active, which most of the time they are. Then we have also a bunch of regen. We have 90 of all elemental resistances, so fire, cold and lightning are all sitting at 90 res, and that is accomplished without mage blood. We also have chaos damage immunity, because we're playing CI, so we're completely immune to chaos damage. We also have 75 attack block, 75 spell block. We have complete immunity to elemental ailments, so 100% ailment immune, and we also have some crit reduction, right? On top of having like over 6k energy shield, which can get to like 7k if you recraft the 3 gear pieces that I have here, that I just spent like the absolute minimum to craft them, because you can put much more currency into this if you want, but I wanted to keep it like fairly medium budget build that would be capable of doing all of the bosses. In terms of the Uber bosses are actually not so easy on this character, because we strongly rely on the max res. And Uber bosses have so much penetration that if you don't have like a huge juiced amount of physical mitigation, which this amount of armor is not enough, and just relying on resistances is not enough. So I did some Uber bosses. I did Uber Shaper. Uber Cortex was like super easy, but then when I went into like Uber Eater of Worlds, I was getting destroyed, right? So Eater of Worlds was not doable easily on this build. You could do it if you're like a god gamer who can dodge everything, but it's not well suited for that. So you can do some Ubers, but not all Ubers. However, if any non-Uber content, you're virtually immortal, right? Because we have the combo of Aegis, recovery plus melding of the flesh, which I'm gonna talk about, and it keeps you super tanky. So let's go maybe through the gem setup, so you can see what are we doing in terms of our skills. Then I'm gonna talk about the gear, and also I'm gonna mention somewhere in between how are we getting to 90 all res without the use of mage blood, right? Because we're using Darkness Enthroned here, because we want that for the chance to poison for our minion, right? So let's go through the gems. First of all, we're using Divergent Herald of Agony. We're using Divergent version because we want more chance to poison. The extra quality gives me additional 20% chance to poison. Together with the skill itself, it gives 40% chance to poison. We're getting extra 40% chance to poison from the chance to poison gem, which we normally have instead of the cast when damage taken, but I put this here just to showcase the AFK potential. But normally we run Stormbrand with chance to poison here, and also Ball Lightning with chance to poison. So that's how we're getting another 40, and then the remaining 20 comes from the Glove Implicit, which is the Eater of Worlds exceptional implicit. So that's the highest tier that you can naturally roll with the Eldritch currency, and that gives me 20% chance to poison on hit. So we got 100% chance to poison on hit, to stack our virulence for the Herald of Agony, and also in order to get even more poisons, we are running the golden rule. The golden rule reflects poisons back to you, and it basically counts every single time you poison something as you poisoning actually 2 targets, right? Because you're inflicting 2 poisons per every poison you inflict on an enemy, because it gets reflected back to you. So Herald of Agony is supported by awakened minion damage for the +1 to levels. Then we've got awakened unbound ailments, which is like the highest damage support that we are using. Then we've got chance to poison, because we want the minion to also of course poison, plus it also gives you flat chaos damage. We also have empower level 4, which gets boosted through the skin of the lords, and we also have awakened vicious projectiles, which is our single target setup for most single target damage. And if you want to increase the clear a little bit, because you can rely on explodes, because we do have explode, our minion killing cursed monsters that we applied the curse through, for example, Stormbrand or the ball lightning, it's gonna explode when the minion kills them. But Fork gives you this extra clear that makes it a little bit nicer, because otherwise the build is a little bit clunky while clearing. However, with Fork it's pretty okay. So that's how we are doing that. Let me just put all of this, all of these skills back here. So then let's look at the weapon. Weapon is kind of interesting. Weapon is crafted with an essence that gives you level 20 spectral spirits. So those are these 3 white skulls that you see here. They are permanently summoned. They are invulnerable. They can never die. They are aggressive, they're attacking a lot, and they are supported with Feeding Frenzy. So they're also giving me Feeding Frenzy buff, which buffs the damage of my Herald of Agony. They're also getting Calling Strike, which means we just get purely Calling Strike, right? So 10% more damage against bosses. This is especially powerful. And then we have Divergent Withering Touch to apply Wither. And that's how we are applying Wither. We have 3 of these attacking all the time, applying Wither. And other than this source of Wither, we also have Withering Step. So the Withering Step is socketed here, Anomalous Withering Step. The reason why I have Withering Step at all, because I wouldn't probably have to use it, but I want to get the extra benefit from the belt enchant, which is extremely powerful, by far the strongest belt enchant of all, in my opinion. Enemies withered by you have -6 to all resistances. This is an insanely powerful belt enchant. It gives you so much damage, but you have to wither the enemies yourself, right? This says withered by you, so I actually have to cast the Anomalous Withering Step. It cannot be my minions or totems or anything like that, as far as I understand it, right? So the Darkness Enthroned enchant is the reason why we're running this. Next, we're running Flame Dash also for some mobility. You could also run Shield Charge on this character. However, we are a little bit socket starved with the extra setup, but you could run Shield Charge as well. And then we've got Determination here just to get the +1 from the Corruption. And Determination is free because we are running Owl's Uprising that has Determination, has no reservation. So this is completely free reservation. In the helmet, I've got the Stormbrand setup. So Stormbrand is level 1 to lower the mana cost. We don't care about the damage that it deals. Then we've got Chance to Poison. Chance to Poison can be leveled because it doesn't increase the mana cost. And then we also have Hex Touch plus Temporal Chains. So on the ring we have Despair, and on this setup we have Temporal Chains. So we're applying 2 curses, both of which increase the damage that our Herald of Agony's poison is dealing. They make the poisons last longer, and they also slow the enemies, right, so that the enemies are doing much less damage to us. In conjunction with the aspect of the spider that I have in here, this is slowing the enemies by a huge amount. So the enemies are basically just moving like they're in perma, like molasses, like they're just super slow. The other setup we have for poisoning enemies, if we want to go to like the 55 virulence that I'm getting, because the Stormbrand will keep you at 40 virulence, no problem. But if you want to go higher to 55, then you want to use some ball lightning to juice it up a bit. And we have a Chance to Poison, Slower Projectiles, Ball Lightning in here. It's anomalous because that increases the cast speed, so why not, but still keeping it at low level for the mana cost. And then we also have Convocation here, so that we get these minions close to us, because for example when you have like proxy shields, when you're clearing a map, it's really nice to have the Herald of Agony jump to wherever you are and shoot from wherever you are, because it increases the clear speed. So Convocation is pretty important for map clear. For bossing it doesn't really matter much. much. And then we have also our aura setup, which has a Purity of Ice. Purity of Ice, it's very important to get it to high enough level so that it gives you 5 to additional max cold res, because that is what we rely for in terms of getting 90 to all elemental resistances. So we've got Purity of Ice, we've got Enlighten level 4, Tempest Shield, and Discipline. Tempest Shield gives us the spell block, Discipline gives us more ES, and Purity of Ice gives us the resistances and max res. We are increasing okay, so let's talk now about how we're getting the 90 to all elemental resistances. So of course we're using Melding, which is somewhere here. Yep. So we've got Melding, which gives you -70 to all elemental resistances and -4 to all maximum elemental resistances. So it's even harder to get the 90 to max res than it was before. However, it is still very, very doable without even that much of a hassle if you use certain technology that we have in here. So I'm going to show you everything. First of all, in the gloves, we have an implicit that gives me +2 to maximum cold resistance, right? And that is an exquisite Searing Exarch implicit. The way you get this is you roll with one of the other ones. Let me just go to the hideout. Where is the portal? So I can show you kind of visually what I'm talking about in terms of these currencies. So, okay, so you see we have a lesser, a greater, grand, and there is also exceptional, right? So in order to get this one, you need exquisite, which is one level above exceptional. So the good way to do this is to either roll like greater or grand. You can probably just spam roll greater and then use Orbs of Conflict until you basically hit the +2 to max cold resistance. And that is how I did it. So this is giving me +2. This is giving me +5. However, the Purity of Ice is also being boosted by Aura Effect. And in order to get enough Aura Effect, we are picking up some passives. So for example, we're picking up Aura Effect here and this Sovereignty Wheel. Then we're also picking up the Influence as well as the Reservation Mastery for auras from your skills have 10% increased effect on you. And then on top of that, I also have here a Brutal Restraint, which gives me 8% increase of auras and then another 8% increased effect of auras in here. Both of these necessary, so you need like a jewel with 2 of these in order to get enough of the aura effect. However, with the current state of the game, you can very easily search for these in POB. In POB, there is an option to search for example, specific modifiers from the Brutal Restraint or any other timeless jewel on the nodes that you have allocated, and you can very, very easily find this. And then I bought this for like 1 or 2 divines, and there are still some available on trade, I'm sure. And there are many, many different versions of this that you can get. And the important part is that it also gives us the Traitor Keystone, which allows us to permanently sustain the flasks, right? So I can press this flask as long as I have 2 slots empty. The Bismuth flask is permanently on. It never runs out unless you roll on your maps that, for example, players gain reduced flask charges, or you pick altar modifiers that make it so that your like enemies hitting you steal flask charges from you or disable your flasks or whatever. Just don't pick those altars and don't roll reduced flask charges gained on your maps, and you're going to be totally fine with this being 100% on. The only drawback of using this instead of a Mage Blood, for example, well, it's not the only drawback because Mage Blood is OP, but the drawback of this is that you have to press this flask once at the beginning of each zone that you walk into, right? So at the beginning of each map, you have to press it once. If you're doing lab, you have to press it at the beginning of each room. I was doing a lab and I forgot to press it once and I died because of it, because without this flask, our resistances are completely trash. But you can completely permanently sustain that on any boss fights, on any maps. It's never gonna run out unless you roll reduced flask charges gained on the map itself. So that's how we are getting this. Where else are we getting? We're also getting +2 from the Winter Prowler. So this is a modifier you can get on, I think, small cluster jewels with cold res, or you can get this also on Megalomaniac. I definitely recommend Megalomaniacs because it's pretty easy to get this with some other decent mod. I got here life regen, which we convert to energy shield regen through Zealot's Oath, as well as the chance to block attack damage. And that is actually necessary for me because that is 8 attack block, and as you can see, we are overcapped by 7, so I actually needed a little bit of block. I think this is maybe even rounded or something, because it without this, let me see, Without this, yeah, without this, we're still missing one block. So this is pretty useful. Plus, I also have the regen. Also, I could have had worse corruption in here. If I had like 4% roll on this, then I would need an extra 2. So this is very, very useful. You can get a lot of good modifiers on this. I had another Megalomaniac without this chance to block that I could potentially use. Where is it? We had Megalomaniac here with Cult Leader and Disciples. The Cult Leader is this one. Minions deal 35% increased damage while you're affected by Herald, and Disciples is 20% increased damage for minions while you're affected by Herald, I think. So there are a lot of different modifiers you can get on this Megalomaniac, but it's important to get one Winter Prowler, and that together gives me the 90 res, and that is what is making us super tanky. Let's go over the gear now, I guess, and let's talk about every single choice that we have in here. So first of all, we're using Skin of the Lords, and we're using a Glancing Blows Skin of the Lords. You need the colors that are here: 2 blue, 1 red, 2 green. Fairly easy to get. Glancing Blows, let's see if there are any available right now. Okay, there are available for like 50 to 100 chaos. Probably some of them will have the right colors. I don't think this is like a super popular thing. If you don't get Glancing Blows, there is another option. You could potentially path to Glancing Blows yourself, or you could use a large or medium Thread of Hope in here to pick up Redemption nodes, pick up some Sovereignty nodes, pick up the Glancing Blows, pick up the Divine Shield, and then you don't have to path into this whole area. And then you can also grab something like Iron Reflexes, and if you grab Iron Reflexes, you could also run Grace, and with Grace you'd be able to increase your armor to like 100k and be significantly tankier. So that's another option that you could do in terms of like physical damage. You wouldn't be significantly tankier for other things, but like for physical damage. So that's another option you can do. But Skin of the Lords is boosting our armor, boosting our energy shield, and giving us +2 to level of Socketed Gems, which effectively gives me +4 to the level of Herald of Agony, because we are getting also the Empower boosted by 2 levels. So Skin of the Lords. Then we've got Owl's Uprising with the Determination, and we're also anointing Prismatic Skin. That's where we get the last remaining 2 to maximum cold resistance, right? So we're getting +2 to maximum all elemental resistances, but the cold is the one that matters because everything else is being equal to the cold. So we're running Owl's Uprising. For the ring, we're running Circle of Nostalgia. I got one with Onslaught, which is very cool and increased effect. You don't need the Onslaught, but it definitely helps me clear the maps faster, right? It helps me also with the cast speed for my spells, so it's very, very cool to get that. The important part of it is the Agony Crawler deals increased damage, and Herald of Agony has increased mana reservation efficiency, which can be boosted up with the Life and Mana Catalyst. So that's how we are getting a lot of reservation efficiency. The other uniques that we're running are the Darkness Enthroned. So as I already mentioned, it has the enchant, which is super powerful, and the reason why we run Darkness Enthroned is because we want to make sure that we are running the chance to poison for minions. So there are a lot of modifiers you can get that are really cool on these Ghastly Eye Jewels, but chance to poison is being boosted really high. So instead of just getting 15, we're getting like, I don't know, 20 something chance to poison. Because of this belt, we only need 3 jewels with the chance to poison. So I have 2 in here and 1 in here. If you don't run this belt, you have to run something like a chest piece that can have potentially, I think it's a Grasping Mail that can have up to 40% chance for minions to poison. So that's another solution. However, then you would lose a lot of damage. And you also are super starved on sockets, right? Because we have to run the Golden Rule. We have to run the Brutal Restraint. We have to run the Forbidden Flesh and Flame. Well, we don't have to, but it's like so much damage that we kind of do. We have to run the Megalomaniac for the Winter Prowler or a small socket, a small cluster jewel. We have to run the small cluster for the Enduring Composure. So we don't really have any other sockets like for the jewels. That's why we need to run this belt, right? For the chance to poison. However, this also gives us a lot of potential armor, energy shield, resistances if you need to fix any other resistances, and also there are other modifiers such as minion attack and cast speed, and there is also minions deal increased damage if you used a minion skill recently. So this is, for example, a very, very powerful version of it. I think this would be better than what I'm wearing here, as long as I can get 100% chance to poison, which I have to check, but you could divine this potentially. So like armor We got like a T2 energy shield, T1 armor, T1 minion deals increased damage if you use minion skill recently, which would be convocation, right? And then also the chance to poison. This is like a godlike jewel actually that I should probably fit into this build instead of what I'm wearing in here. So that's what you're looking for. So that's what Darkness Enthroned does for us, and everything is being like multiplied by 1.75, right? So we're getting more value out of all of these things. Then we are running Aegis Aurora, of course, which is a huge layer of defense. It gives us tons of block and the recovery on block. I think pretty much everybody is familiar with this tech because it's been used for a really long time, like in the past couple leagues, and it's super powerful. In terms of the rare items, every single item that I have here I crafted myself. The wand here is a very cool tech that I shamelessly stole from someone from POE Ninja. I saw someone use this like Spectral Spirits tech, which is really cool, allows you to apply Wither, all of that stuff that we talked before about. So what you want to do is get a Convoking Wand. If you want to craft this, for the Convoking Wand, I think you need level, let me confirm quickly, whatever is the highest level of like the minion damage, 84. So you need 84, ideally with a speed enchant because it's pretty cheap. And then you want to put an essence on this for the Spectral Spirits. That essence is Spectral Spirits. That is an essence of Insanity. So using an essence of Insanity, make sure you have 4 modifiers only, and you fracture that. 4 tries on average is what you're gonna require, right? And that's gonna make it possible to actually craft this. Otherwise it will be very hard, because in order to get like +2, so +1 to all spell skill gems and +1 to all minion skill gems, you craft this with fossils. So you can go to Craft of Exile and you can just select these two, compute best selection, and it's gonna show you that you wanna use Corroded, Jagged, Metallic, and Shattering, and it's gonna block everything except for increased spell damage, as well as increased minion damage. So you basically wanna roll these. It's gonna be like 12 tries on average to hit +2, and then you're probably gonna have some kind of a minion damage or spell damage. You can roll a few more times if you want some decent minion damage. Once you get these, basically you can do something like suffixes can be changed, Veiled Chaos, and or like Ashling, right? And you can get the Veiled modifier, which you can unveil with like minion attack speed, cast speed. I got this just purely from the fossil spam. This was the result I got from the fossils, so I didn't craft it any further. But you can do a lot of min-maxing with this as well. You can get much higher tier of the minion damage, but that's basically the wand. Then we have the gloves. The gloves, of course, on all of these items, actually the implicits are like all these 3 items. Implicits are the big part of them. The mods themselves on the items are not that strong, except for the helmet maybe. But for the gloves, what you want to do is you get Sork gloves. You can get like fractured res or fractured strength on them, whatever you can find, on like item level 84 or 85, and then basically you spam essences with either the res or the strength, whatever you don't have fractured, until you hit 1 other good mod on the suffix, and that gives you 3 good suffixes. And then you craft with the Eldritch currency and until you get some energy shield on it, and you craft +1 to level of socketed AoE gems, because that way we are boosting the level of Purity of Ice to a high enough level so that it gives me +5 to additional max cold res. And then we roll the implicits, which I talked about before. First you roll the cold res, you boost it, and then you have to use the exceptional Eater of Worlds until you get the chance to poison on hit, and the gloves are done. The enchant, I was running lab for the challenges on this character, so I naturally just enchanted the Commandment of Light on gloves from the Gift of the Goddess. I think when I was running, I got like the best enchant on the boots, which is the regen if you've been hit recently, and the best enchant on the gloves, which is Commandment of Light, which basically makes you regenerate 6% of your life per second if you've been crit recently, right? So this is super powerful enchant actually. So then we have the helmet. For the helmet, you want to get a Hubris Circlet that is item level 84 with the Herald of Agony enchant. And if you want to go a really good helmet, so then you're gonna have to fracture +2 to level of all minion skill gems. I got +2 to level of all minion skill gems. I rolled it with fossils. Again, you can go to Craft of Exile, check which fossils you need to roll the +2. You can also alt spam. You can also You can also spam just like random essences. You can do Scour Alt, but with Scour Alt, it's gonna take you like 1,000 tries actually, as far as I remember. So I just crafted it with fossils. If you hit +1, you can also try to do Reforge more likely. It took me actually like 6 tries, I think, to fracture this. This is like the probably most expensive part of the whole build if you want to get that. So we fractured the +2. Just make sure you don't put any like Eater of Worlds or Searing Exarch implicit before you fracture, because you cannot fracture influenced items. And after that, we are basically rolling essences. So we're using Essences of Loathing for the mana reservation until we get 2 decent suffixes. So that could be 2 resistances, that could be res and strength, for example. And if you do that, then you don't need the strength on the gloves, and you can get triple res instead. So those are the suffixes. And then for prefixes, you can craft them with Eldritch Currency. You want to just craft some energy shield, and that's basically it for the explicit modifiers. And then for implicit modifiers, you need increased mana reservation efficiency of skills, which is the exception. The 10% is the exceptional Eater of Worlds modifier. So again, you can lower the tiers. You can roll it with the lower tiers, and then when you hit the mana reservation, you can boost it with the Orbs of Conflict. And then Grand Eldritch Embers are going to give you the 10% increased cast speed. You can also have like minion movement speed or something. I think cast speed is the best one, the best modifier that you can get for this build. And then for boots, these are just very generic boots that have ailment avoidance and energy shield and double T2 res. So the way you craft these boots is, again, you find 86 Sork boots with some kind of a fracture that has like one of the resistances that you need. So ideally not cold, because usually you're gonna have enough cold from Purity of Ice. So like lightning or fire res fractured on these boots. They're pretty cheap to get. Then you're gonna roll the essence until you roll 1 other good res on them. So you just use the essence again, like we used before, Essence of Loathing, until you get 1 good resistance on the suffix, because the other one is going to be guaranteed fractured. And then you use Eldritch Currency to craft the prefixes until you hit some movement speed and energy shield. And for implicits, you want to get the Eater of Worlds, chance to avoid elemental ailments, and Searing Exarch, increase action speed, because it's going to increase your movement speed as well as cast speed. And of course the enchant that I got. The last item that I crafted is the 2-stone ring. So for the 2-stone ring, you can buy something that is like half made. Basically what you want is a 2-stone ring, because we need the extra resistances, and you will need dexterity roll, which you can get from essences. You will need Curse Enemies with Despair, and then you need an empty suffix. When you have an empty suffix, you can put the Aspect of the Spider, which in the ring is not going to be affected by any support, so it's not going to mess anything for the reservation of it. I just rolled it with essences until I got Despair on hit and empty suffix, and just spammed the Dexterity essences on that. And then for prefixes, I did prefixes cannot be changed, Veiled Chaos Orb, and unfortunately it filled the suffixes with like the fire damage to attacks and energy shield. Normally you can just unveil. Ideally you'd unveil either the minus to the cost of the skills, minus mana cost to the skills, or you would unveil it with the life regen and extra mana, right? Life regen is very useful as well. Energy shield is something that you can craft. You can craft up to like 30 max energy shield, which also can get increased with the catalyst for this. And that's basically all of the items. For flasks, we are using Bismuth Flask with reduced charges per use, 40% increased elemental resistances during flask effect. Here we're using Alchemist Grant. If I remove the Quicksilver for bossing, for example, this has almost 100% uptime. There's like 1.5 seconds in between, which of course ideally you wouldn't have that, but even with 28% quality and reduced charges per use, this is like the best you can get for the uptime on this flask, right? And it's gonna be like active almost all the time. You can see like 1, 2, like, yeah, it's like 2 seconds maybe downtime on this one, right? So it's not up all the time. However, the resistance one is up all the time. All right, let's talk about the passive skill tree. So passive skill tree is actually fairly straightforward. We are, oh, why am I doing this? This probably shouldn't be here. I can remove this. Was I missing some kind of we've got the region. What can I grab? Doesn't really matter. We can grab just like energy shield and armor. This is a better one to get. All right, so for the passive skill tree, we are grabbing some energy shield, grabbing the minion damage here and going through this. The reason why I grabbed these two passives in here is for the increased flask charges gained, because I wanted to see if I can permanently sustain this flask, but I should probably actually not even run this and just run this instead, and then another point I can put into... We can put just into some minion damage resistances, or we can also put this into some energy shield dexterity. All right, so main focus is on energy shield, main focus is on auras. We're getting also ailment avoidance from Arcane Sanctuary. The cast speed also helps me a little bit, but the Arcane Sanctuary is the important part here to avoid elemental ailments. We also have 20% chance to avoid the elemental ailments while holding a shield from the shield mastery in here, which also gives me enough chance to cap my block. And then the rest of the ailment avoidance is coming from the boots. We are running 3 large cluster jewels. On the large cluster jewels, what you're looking for is potentially the increased effect. You're looking for max energy shield. You're looking for some dexterity, because you're going to be dexterity starved otherwise and have to do something extra for that. You're also looking for armor. You're also looking for minion attack speed and cast speed. Those are pretty good modifiers to get. So we're running 3 8 passive large clusters. For the mediums, we're running 3 mediums that have Cult Leader and Pure Agony for the virulence. So we got 1, 2, 3. Then we're also running this Megalomaniac and small cluster that I already talked about. Of course, we are CI, so we're picking that plus this. We're picking the reservation nodes because they also give me the aura effect. We're picking the block and mana regen plus some extra movement speed from this brutal restraint. Traitor, energy shield regen, more energy shield mana. Here we have the Forbidden Flame, Forbidden Flesh for the unnatural strength, which gives me a lot of damage. Then we have another mana reservation plus increased effect of course non-curse auras from my skills. More energy shield and armor. We're also picking up Rune Binder so that we can have 2 Storm Brands attached to the enemy, so like that's double the poisons, right? So that's very, very important to path to. And then we have Divine Shield, which is going to give me some extra regen if we mitigate physical damage, Golden Rule, and a last jewel, which is able to cap the chance to poison for my Herald. And that's pretty much it. The character is very, very comfy for anything other than Ubers, right? Ubers are very challenging on this character. You will be able to do some Ubers, but not all of them, like the Eater and probably the Searing Exarch. The Searing Exarch you could maybe cheese with like a Ruby Flask for reduced fire damage as well, but the fact that they penetrate so much of your elemental resistances means that your like main thing that we are investing all of our currency into for the defensive layers, which is the max res, is being negated very strongly. For Ubers, you need to either be quick and have insane damage, like just go glass cannon and dodge everything, maybe die a few times, but you're gonna one-shot or like two-shot the boss. That's one approach you can take for Ubers. Another approach for Ubers is to have like different, like unmodifiable, unchangeable layers of mitigation. Because for example, Uber Eater of Worlds, he has tons of penetration, so he's gonna penetrate our lightning res, and it's gonna be like we don't have this at all. And then it also has attacks that have, for example, like a line written. If you look at POEDB, enemies have minus 1000% chance to block. So we cannot rely on our block, we cannot rely on our block recovery, we cannot rely on our max res. So certain Uber bosses just completely will destroy me. However, if you're doing like a non-Uber content, as you could see, I had an invitation which was like 170 quant invitation that we rolled and sat AFK in it, and the character was untouchable. You can tank, for example, Simulacrum. I'm pretty sure you can AFK every wave of Simulacrum with this character. In maps, you're untouchable unless you roll like mods that brick your build, which would be, for example, like you gain less, like players gain less flask charges, and then this flask runs out and then you're getting destroyed, right? Because you have like 40 res, but that would be purely your fault if you do that. So other than that, the character is super tanky. Any type of lake, like I did all the hardest lakes. I haven't died in any of the lakes. All the other challenges were like super easy. All the other bosses were super easy. Even something like Uber Cortex was very easy. Uber Shaper was challenging at first because I still haven't upgraded certain parts of my build and I was playing it wrong. When I adjusted the build, when I got this enchant, when I got the Empower 4, and when I adjusted my playstyle, Uber Shaper actually was very simple. You just need to make sure that you don't take too many of the purple balls to the face. You can tank 1 or maybe 2, but if you take like 3, then you're dead. So you have to make sure to dodge certain things, but that's always a requirement in the Uber bosses. You have to respect some of the mechanics. So that's basically the character, super tanky. I don't recommend this for everyone for sure. Like if your goal is to just kill all of the Uber bosses and have like an Uber bosser, then this is probably not the character for you. But if you want to do regular bosses, if you want to do simulacrums, if you want to do invitations of this kind, if you want to do just mapping or challenging content that you don't care about the speed of your character, but you care about like not dying and being safe and having very chill time with the just putting up a couple storm brands and just moving around and your herald just destroying everything, then this was a very successful build at that. So the tankiness is huge. Outside of Uber content, the damage is pretty good. It's like 10 million DPS. That is just coming from the very high uptime minion that you have. So very cool character, very different take, I guess, on the Herald of Agony, because we are scaling the poison, we're slowing the enemies. So this was a very cool experiment. Hopefully this has been helpful and you learned something, at least maybe like how to scale Melding of the Flesh without having mage blood necessarily. So that's an interesting thing that you can do. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and see you next time. Bye bye.